Hello, welcome to part 2. In part 1 we made this spiky ball, and in part 2 with a few tweaks we'll hopefully make it slightly more interesting. As before, I'll be using LightWave 3D 2025.0.2. Let's make a couple of tweaks just to change things up a little bit. I'm going to take the nodes off of that and I'm going to make them a little bit thinner. It's currently looking a little bit uniform, so I want to start by changing the length of these 2-point polychains. This is quite simple. Let's get a random scalar node. Before we plug that in though, let's have a look at this line geometry node and see what we're dealing with. So my Y, this is what I want to randomize. It's currently at 0.4. Let's take the count into the seed, open this up, and perhaps we'll go from 0.3 to 0.6 to begin with, see how that looks. And then we want to make vector. Let's take a quick look. So these two are set at 0. Let's just double check we're set at 0. Yep. And then the output of the make vector into position 1. And this is the first little annoyance with ProGeometry nodes. It doesn't look like it's done anything, but if we nudge the timeline, you'll see it has in fact done something. Perhaps we'll add a few more lines. Let's increase the level in this base object. Okay. We may want to change this seed later. We'll just get an add node. Just the usual scalar, take the count into the add, into the seed, and we'll put any old number in here. If we use the arrow keys to update the timeline, for some reason we get this error. So you may have to go in and manually nudge the timeline. Next step, I want to add little objects to the end of each of these lines. Let's create a new null and call it instance. We'll use ProGeo for this as well, so let's remove those. Move this over so I've got a shortcut to get to this bit. What we're going to do is add a geometry node, and then we're going to go for the primitive node. Don't want a cube, although we could have a cube, but let's go for a sphere and let's make it quite small. And we don't need that many faces, so let's take this down. Now we can't see it because the other thing's in the way, so let's hide that. There it is. So let's turn our base object back on and let's turn this instance off from the renderer because we're not going to need to see that there. And let's jump back to our ProGeo base nodes. Okay, let's close that down. I'll show you how we can set these up as instances later, but for now we're going to use them as objects. So for that I'm going to need a from mesh node here. There it is. I'm going to double click that and I'm going to select that instance circle that we just created. The way we're going to achieve this is we're just going to offset it the distance of each of these lines. It's much easier to do than talk about it, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the output of this make vector into the position of the from mesh. Let's get a combined geometry node. Let's drag the result into that one, a new input is created. Line geometry goes in there, the result goes into the geometry. We now have each of those objects attached to each of those lines. Jump back into that instance and I'll give myself a couple more levels of roundness. There we go. Might have to again update the timeline, and it worked this time. That's good. Back to our base. Now this is where we can scale down further. We could also randomize this scale just by taking a similar setup and plonking it straight into the scale. Well, it's kind of worked quite well in this case, so let's keep it like that for now. Let's just say I did like the way it randomized that scale, but I still want it a bit smaller. I could always go back into the instance and make the base instance, as I'm calling it, a lot smaller. Nudge the timeline. There we go. So lots of flexibility there. It's also important to note that both the from mesh and the line geometry need the same random seed, because if they both have different seeds, they won't line up. As we've seen, I'm getting this error pop up when I hit the arrow buttons to nudge the timeline. I think these add and multiplication nodes are older tech. Let's try replacing this with a scalar. Now using the arrow keys to nudge the timeline is all good. So I don't get that error if I'm using a scalar. I want to add some little distortions to this 2-point polyline. And the way we can do this is by using the set point node. Now if you want to animate or distort stuff, it's better to do it within this node graph rather than going to another nodal displacement. More on that another time, but for now, if you can do it within this node graph, this is the place to do it. So let's get a set position node. We'll basically add this set position between the combine geometry node and the add geometry node. Everything disappears, not sure why. Even if I hit the arrows on the timeline, it's not updating, but we'll quickly gloss over that by getting a procedural. And all I'm going to do is quite simply take the bump into the position. Now's the time to nudge the keys to update the timeline, and there we go. Beautiful. Couple of things we need to do. Firstly, we need to add a little bit of fall off. So let me get a gradient to do this. Let's set this to Y because that's the direction of this line geometry. As you can see, put it at position 1 at 100%, which is white. And we can either take the color into the bump amplitude, or for something a little tidier, let's just take the bump into there and take the gradient into the scale. The other thing you'll notice is only distorting the object on the end points is because there's not enough points within this line. So let's double click on that, under the subdivide, let's just take it up a little bit. Nudge the arrows to update the timeline, and there we go. Not very appealing, but it's a good starting point. They all seem to be distorting quite similarly. Is that a word? Anyway, let's get a random vector. And similar to the positional offset, I'm going to take the count into the seed, and we'll change the position of the texture per loop item, if that's what you call it. So let's just put it in there. Let's just keep it default, see what happens. Okay. Perhaps we'll make the scale a little larger. And obviously LightWave comes with a lot of lovely textures to play around with. Not that one. Let's put it on ripples as it self animates. See how that looks. Whoa. Final steps, don't worry, we're nearly there. So we might not want these objects to distort, in which case we're going to have to swap those out for instances. Remove this from mesh. So let's delete those two and take the result into the set geometry. There we go. So we've just got the lines. Close this down. We don't need that because we're going to go for the traditional instance generator now. So we'll make that slightly larger. We're still on the ProGeo base object, instance generator, and we're going to use this one here at the top of the list, instance generator, the one that's been there forever and is still very good. So we'll take the add object and we're going to take the instance and add that to the list. Texture shade so we can see it. For the item, we're going to select the points and we want max points. But actually, let's take the scale down a little bit. As you can see, it's done it on every single point of that object. We don't want that, we just want it on the end pieces. So you might think we'll do that via a weight, and you'd be right. Layer type will select to gradient, and then the input parameter will be a weight map. And under here, you should see a couple of weight maps, but you don't. So I think there's a bug going on there, or it's not missing, or something's incomplete. So let's close that down, shift click on the T to remove that, and let's go over to the nodes. Use nodes and edit this. So this should be simple. Let's get a UV. Under UV map, we will see the line geometry weight map. This was created when we set up the geo node, so let's close that down. Next we'll get a logic node, plug the V, which is starts here and ends here, 0 to 1 per line. So we'll take that into the A. So if A equals B, show it, otherwise don't show it. And then I'm simply just going to take the out into the weight. There we go. Now I should say that earlier I did add a little bit of rotation to the heading, which is why you can see it spinning around. A couple of quick notes. Texturing, shift click on here while we're on VPR will bring up the surface editor. As before, if you're using instances, that will just be the same as usual. For the ProGeo stuff, basically the names should reflect what's going on in this ProGeo node graph. There's a little bit of guesswork sometimes. If you start changing names or turning on tick boxes, things can come and go and you can get lost, so that's something to be aware of. By far and away the most annoying thing though is when you've done all this hard work, you've saved the scene, you've closed it down. The next day you come along, you open the scene and this happens. Where is my scene go? Well, strangely enough, it's all still there, but you have to save once you've loaded. It's a bit annoying, but it should bring it back to life. Also be careful whilst using VPR and the slider. They tend to not agree sometimes. So have fun, try changing the base object, adding your own objects. ProGeo definitely not cooked yet, but it's a step in the right direction.